Good morning and welcome to another episode of Think and Grow Rich Mastermind. Hi, my name is Ann McNeil and I am the master wealth builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses. And we are when I say very excited today, yes, very excited because we have a very special guest, which you will hear a little bit about shortly. But we're talking about a very special principle today. Now, we're in the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And every Saturday, yes, 52 weeks out of the year, on Saturday, we come and share with you one of the 13 principles espoused in this book by Napoleon Hill, talking about success principles. Today, that principle is the 13th step toward riches, and it is also called the sixth sense, but it's also called infinite intelligence and so many other things. But what do you call it? How do you tap into that sixth sense? Is it through meditation? Is it through prayer? Is it through silence? Is it through journaling? How do you actually respond to those hunches, that flash of inspiration that you receive? What do you do about that? Well, connect with us today, but also remember to comment, like, and share the podcast. And also remember to subscribe as we talk and share our experiences, the principles from the book, and so many other resources with you today. But I am not here alone. No, I can act like it, but I am not alone. And with me today is none other than my special co-host. Yes, he's special because he's here. Galen Bingham. Good morning, Galen. Let's bring Galen to to the podcast, to the YouTube.
Ah,
How you doing this morning?
fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist, and I am incredibly excited about this topic because this is the principle that brings all the other principles together. This is what we've been working for. This is what you've been building. If you've been following along with us, and we began with the first principle, this is what all the hard work has been for. And so many people will get to this point and they will say, because I don't understand how this works, I can't really act on it. Well, this is what the hard work is for. And even the author says, understanding the sixth sense comes only by meditation through mind development from within. The sixth sense probably is the medium of contact between the finite mind of man and the infinite intelligence. And for this reason, it is a mixture of both mental and spiritual. And so when you talk about mixing both the mental and the spiritual, I can't think of a better person to help us talk through this than our guest today. So I'll let you introduce our guest. But boy, I'll tell you, when you talk about mixing the mental and all the things that you've learned and gained from life, and pairing that with the spiritual, where you got access to information that you couldn't gain through life, our guest is the person to bring that home. So I'm excited as well. And back to you.
Well, I think we're going to tag team our bio for our guest today because I am going to do justice and honor. I want to go on and say praise and worship, but we won't go that far. Not to. But our special guest today is none other than Mr. Wyman Wymbush. And Wyman is a professional speaker. He's a trainer, multidisciplined problem solver, known as the wisdom broker. He combines 31 years in corporate America and 30 years, wow, in the US Navy to direct individuals to the most direct path to sustained success. Welcome to the podcast, Wyman. How are
Thank
you?
you, and thank you for the warm welcome. Good morning, Galen. It's always good to be amongst friends. And to
On
be amongst
this side of
friends.
the camera, Wyman, on this side of the camera, right?
Yes, yes. Yes. And I was saying it's always good to be amongst friends, particularly discussing this topic. This topic is very few topics really address the totality of our being. Yes, we're physical beings, but we're a spirit as well. And the sixth sense demands that we go there. So I'm excited, Ann, where you're going to take us this morning.
Well, we are going to go there today, but we want to make sure that we ask everyone to please subscribe and share the podcast. So before we do all of that, we're going to go to our short video that shares and discusses the entire litany of the 13 principles. And while we do that, we're going to ask all of you who come on and join us regularly, we're going to ask you to please pull out your book, walk along with us, because it's a lot more than just sitting on the other side of this podcast and listening and listening and listening. We want you to be a doer, all right? And in being a doer, we want you to think about, how do you activate this principle? So shortly, Galen's going to tee up the 13 principles for us. But as he's preparing to do that, he's going to share his comments. And as he prepare to do that, I'm just going to go through just to share as we talk about what are these principles. And there are 13. Some people talk about Napoleon Hill's 17 principles, but today we're discussing the 13 in the video. But our conversation is going to be actually on the 13th. And it is, whether you call it a connecting link or whatever you want to call it, it is the summation, if you will, of how to actually activate your desire. All right, Galen?
Yeah, and I think a couple of things that you've said here, kind of in passing, I think has a lot more significance. It's really about, how do you activate these principles? So when you take a listen to these, think about, how do I put these into action? Because it's one thing to understand them intellectually, and I'll tell you, the first couple of times I read this book, I understood them intellectually, but it wasn't until I started activating them and putting them to use in my life that I started getting results and seeing things happen in a very special way. So take a listen to the attached and think from the lens of, how can I activate these in a special way.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically. But we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the Mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right, all right. So there you have the 13 principles. I want to turn this back over to Ann, but first I want to acknowledge the folks that are hanging out with us today. Doretha, Colette, over there on YouTube. Diane is in YouTube. Shannon, of course, Wyman is always in YouTube, but he's also in studio with us today. If you're watching via YouTube, I want you to hit that thumbs up button so that the world knows that we are having an amazing time over here. Right now, we got 3 thumbs up, but let's go ahead and get as many as we possibly can, and then share, because we are getting ready to get into the whole purpose for this Think and Grow Rich process. This Sixth Sense with our guest Wyman Wymbush. And I'm going to turn this back over to Ann so she can get us where we need to be. Ann, back to you.
All right. Wyman, you know the script, you know the flow of the show. And you know, we always ask our guests, especially the very special guests, to take us back. I want to go back to further than when you were first introduced to the book and the principles. I want to go back to, at what point in your childhood did you realize that there was something special? I think Aristotle calls it, he calls the sixth sense infinite intelligence, common sense, right? We have our 5 senses, we know what they are, sight, sound, all of those things, right? But then there's a sixth sense about us. And at what point do you recall connecting to that and understanding that there's something else other than the sight, the sound, the touch, the feel, all of those things? And then once you take us back there, then can you bring us up to your introduction to this principle? And then we're going to get into a dialogue with the audience. You know, we have questions that will be in the chat from some of your favorite for your favorite friends who are always here supporting us the same as you do. But take us back, because I want people to understand your journey. You have 30 years, in corporate, then you have 30 years, serving this great country. And thank you also for that service. But take us back, will you please?
Yes, and it's kind of funny when you said, take me back to childhood, first time, realized there's something beyond the reading, writing, and arithmetic that you learn in school. And I remember I was about 12 years old. I was in Chicago visiting my family on the South Side. They live in South Holland now, up in the Chicagoland area. And I remember turning to my aunt, and I thought this was cool, right? The difference between a smart man, a wise man, and a fool. A smart man, learns his lessons of hard knocks. A fool never learns. A wise man learns from the hard knocks of others. In other words, I'd rather find out the stove is hot by watching you burn your hand than for me to figure it out on my own. And I realized that wisdom was something to be desired. And, my name in the industry, if you would, is the wisdom broker, right? In other words, that connotes, that implies rather that the wisdom I have is not my own. I get it from the source of infinite wisdom. And I simply broker it out to others so they can live a successful life at that high performance mindset level and reap the rewards thereof. And the book, Napoleon Hill, when he talks about the sixth sense, as you mentioned, Anne, so eloquently, it implies that this is a sense beyond the 5 senses that we learn about in health class. It is real. And from a faith perspective, we hear that, we are earthly, we're physical bodies on earth having a temporary experience, right? In other words, we're heavenly beings having a temporary experience on earth. That heavenly is the sixth sense area. And when we start to operate in it, our lives change. Our lives change. Even the previous chapter before this, the one before this, you were discussing the subconscious mind. Think about it. You're acknowledging something that is subconscious. That's an oxymoron. Right? But when you learn how to do that, leveraging the sixth sense aspect, your life is transformed and you have the ability to transform others. I'm not sure if that answers the question, Anne.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Now I want to go back to that 12-year-old young man. Was there a situation or incident that connected you or had you to question this feeling, this knowing, if you will? And I want to make sure that we're all understanding that when we think of the sixth sense, think of it as that hunch. Think of it as that gut feeling. Think of it as a knowing that you really cannot put your finger on. Think of it as you're in silence and you are contemplating something that you would like an answer to. And you find that if you sit long enough, there's a download that starts happening. So Wyman, for you, can you share with us a particular experience where you know that you know that you know that you did not know where it came from? Okay.
The only thing I can think of, and as a mother, you can go into a nursery or in a big room and you hear lots of children's voices, but your child's voice is the one that captures your attention. For me, it was if there was a call, not unlike the child, the call, the voice of your own child that was distinct in others and that was calling you to a place. You couldn't put your arms around, you couldn't define it, but you were called to that place where wisdom lies and where the rewards of wisdom and operating in that sixth sense area, the spiritual realm. Dr. Miles Monroe talked about the unseen realm. Think about that, right? He talks about the seen realm that we can see with our natural senses. And he also acknowledges there's an unseen realm that is real, and we have the ability to operate and function in it as well. He, a minister of the gospel, Dr. Monroe, also a wonderful businessman and teacher, was talking about operating in that sixth sense area, an area that transcends, again, your natural senses, but there's work to be done there, and there are rewards to be gained there. And for me, I feel like there was that call, indistinguishable, and very distinguished, rather, from all the other calls out there to a higher level, right? You're called to operate at a higher level. I don't want to go to church too bad, but you know, Annie, it wasn't going to take, how long are we into this now? Okay, so here we go. Apostle Paul said he seeks towards the high calling, which implies, and that there's a lesser calling. There are folks out there in business trying to reach their dreams, goals, and aspirations, operating at a lesser calling, when a higher calling, a higher level of existence, a higher level of functioning is available that includes the sixth sense. And that's why this chapter is so important in Napoleon Hill's book.
All right, now you take us to Galen Bingham, because I know I can see him smiling in the studio. Galen, you had a question or comment?
Yeah. So, I want to key in on something, I think, Wyman, that you brought attention to, where we call this your subconscious, and that doesn't really seem to fit. And I think, Ann, you mentioned Aristotle talked about that the sixth sense is your common sense. There are times when following the sixth sense does not make academic sense. It doesn't make mental sense. And you talk about the connection to scripture. If you're at a wedding and they're running out of wine, it doesn't make sense to go get some jugs of water. That just doesn't make sense, right? If you got a whole crowd of folks gathering and they're hungry, it doesn't make sense to go get some baskets and put five loaves of bread in a basket. That doesn't make sense. But if those folks hadn't followed their sixth sense to do what was asked, as opposed to what made common sense, then they would have missed out on a whole nother level of understanding. So help me by talking through the difference between this subconscious and this superconscious, where you're tapping into something that might not make sense, but it's a hunch. Back to what Ann was saying, it's a hunch, it's a nudging, it's a calling that, again, might not even make common sense, but it opens up the door to a whole nother level of understanding.
Great question. As you're saying that and talking about the first miracle, turning water into wine, it doesn't make sense, but faith makes it so. Come on, right? And Napoleon Hill talks about faith in one of the earlier chapters. He talked about, belief. He talked about desire. Right? It doesn't make sense for an African-American male raised by a white mother, right, single parent, to have the audacity to think that he can become president of the United States. It doesn't make sense, right? But if you have faith, right, and you believe, you act on that faith, and it was so. And so what we must understand is the sixth sense is not this spooky thing, that we try to make it to be. Our grandmothers, we talked about this earlier. You bring your friends over, and you bring your friends over, and she said, "Oh, that young lady has a nice spirit about her." What? How can you see spirit? You can't. It's that unseen realm that Dr. Miles Monroe was talking about. But your grandmother knew what she was talking about. And she'd also say, you need to stay away from that young man, right? Because his intentions are not right. There's something wrong about miss in his spirit. She didn't have any information. There was no Google available. There was no way to look it up or research. But I think in hindsight, we look back and grandma was right. The scriptures talk about a spirit of discernment. Well, that doesn't fall in the 5 natural senses. But I'm telling you, you are in trouble in this day and age if you don't leverage your spirit of discernment to decide whether you should go, not go, stay, leave, etc. There are a lot of decisions that your natural senses cannot guide you in, Galen. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, it makes sense. And I was actually thinking about it doesn't seem, a lot of these things don't seem reasonable. And that's a word that we can use as opposed to not making sense. It doesn't seem reasonable, but I'd say most great things started as an unreasonable thought, right? It doesn't make sense that you could walk into a room, flip a switch, and all of a sudden light would show up. That's not reasonable. It's reasonable today, but it wasn't reasonable then. And again, it's just this idea that you can have all of your education, but yet great things happen on the other side of doing what, quite honestly, does not seem reasonable to pursue.
Absolutely. Again, I just thought about this. I hadn't tied this together, but the book Blink, I believe it's Malcolm Gladwell, basically says within the fraction of a second when you meet someone, you get a read on whether they're good for you or not good for you. And 90% of the time, that first blink judgment is spot on correct. A lot of us ignore it, that sixth sense, only to regret it. And those who say, well, I'm going to wait a minute, they do their research and due diligence and find out that they were right. And there's an example of the sixth sense. It's not spooky. It's something that God put in each of us. You know, you've heard the saying that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, right? So there's features and components of our being, including the sixth sense, that few of us endeavor to explore. Therefore, we never leverage. Therefore, we never live to the fullest of our potential.
Mm. Now, I want to ask one more question, and then I'm gonna. Donnelly is, to no surprise, Donnelly is in the studio audience. So I'm gonna give Donnelly some time to queue up a question for our guest. But Wyman, let me go back and bring together your entire bio. You've had some experiences where you've been called to make decisions that impact thousands of people, maybe even millions of people in the military. You could be following your sixth sense, but other folks around you, they're going to want to have some reasoning behind it to follow it fully. You've had some time where you've been working for one of the top business corporations in the world. You've probably made some decisions that have impacted millions of dollars. You could be following your sixth sense, but in order to invest, there are folks that are going to want some reasoning behind it. So my question is, how do you marry your education and your mental capacity, your intellectual reasoning, with this knowing that the real power is in following that sixth sense? How do you marry those two? Because we're not saying throw away your intellect. We're not saying throw that away. We're saying marry the two. How do you do that?
Great question. And it's not a difficult question. When you speak to the source of infinite knowledge, and for me, that's our creator, Elohim, God, right? All knowledge, all information, everything that exists came out of him, including logic, including the laws of nature, including science and math. He created that, but he also created the rules that govern the spirit realm, the unseen realm. Same God, they complement each other. In other words, just because you don't know about the law of gravity doesn't mean you won't be impacted by it if you jump off a skyscraper. You're going to fall at 32 feet per second squared, terminal velocity you'll attain, and that will govern you. Just because you're not aware of the laws of the spirit realm, the law of sowing and reaping, for example, doesn't mean that you're not subject to it. The street committee, who never stepped foot in the church, will say what goes around comes around. Even they understand the law of sowing and reaping. And so as I operate, I can no longer, it's just as impossible for me to separate my knowledge and my ability to understand and embrace and leverage spiritual law in the unseen realm from the natural law, the seen realm, as it would be for me to separate the fact that I'm an African-American male. When I show up, you see me, you know what I am. And when I open my mouth, you know I'm someone who functions and believes in the unseen realm, the spirit realm, and listens to the voice that provides guidance in both the seen and unseen, the natural realm and the spiritual realm.
And Wyman and I could have this entire conversation as we do from time to time by ourselves, but you better get in here. You better get in here.
Listen, I can listen to Wyman all day and the two of you together. I want to go back, Wyman and Galen, to something Galen asked about the subconscious mind and the sixth sense. And I think it's interesting that the author basically shares with us that the sixth sense is a portion, if you will, of the subconscious mind that we tend to refer to it as creative imagination. And so when we go back to imagination and knowing that it's synthetic, which is two things we create, already created, and we create a third, versus the creative. The creative is what Wyman is talking about, is the alignment here and the connectivity of those two, the sixth sense and that subconscious mind. Tapping into the creative imagination. But how do you tap into that creative imagination? And that brings about these ideas, these plans, these thoughts, these hunches. And I want to stay there for a moment, because I think so many of us, going back to what Wyman said, you know, the laws that Wyman referred to, these are also laws. And when you think about the laws of creativity and how do you go from your desire to your creative thoughts to the realization of those, because that, I think, is also the purpose of this infinite intelligence, this sixth sense, to bring to us whatever it is we desire. But oftentimes, exactly like Wyman said, we don't stop long enough to pay attention. But Wyman, I want to move from that to go to one of my favorite subjects, one of my favorite groups, and that is our Black NSA and the fact that we're walking through one of these principles each month. But can you share with us your first introduction to this book, let alone these principles?
Yes, I was glad to do that. It was actually in Black NSA, right? Part of the National Speakers Association. And there's, you call them BRG Affinity Group, just a support group of like-minded people. Black NSA, or the folks of melanated community supporting each other within the confines of NSA, but not limited to people with melanated skin, because it is an open group. We welcome everybody. Why? Because knowledge doesn't have a skin color. Success doesn't have a skin color. Wisdom doesn't have a skin color. And we're all about that in Black NSA. But someone mentioned about the mastermind, like I would say, most of the folks in the Black NSA mastermind would say Ann McNeil was the one who say, you might want to think about this. And I did, and I've been hooked on it ever since. It's been, man, over 10 years or so now, I would imagine, at this point. But that was my first introduction to the Mastermind. However, the book, introduction to the book, is kind of interesting because, you know, my mother passed in 1999. My father moved in with us 4 years ago, and I was moving through the books in his home as we cleaned out his house. I found a copy of Think and Grow Rich that belonged to my mother. And it was copywritten, it was published in 1960. And so I suspect that she had been dropping nuggets and portions of the book Think and Grow Rich on me all during my childhood, and I did not realize it. So I think that, you know, next to my mother, it would be you, Ann, that introduced me to the book and the Mastermind.
All right, Galen.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave that there. So
Well, hey,
I didn't know that. I did not know that. I'm excited. And as always, to God be the glory in the sharing of our stories. But I want to challenge all of us to do the same, because there's so many lives that will only hear Galen's voice. They will only hear Wyman's voice. They will only hear your voice, whoever you are that's listening to us. They're not going to hear mine. And so when we find something that's so valuable, so important as this gift, if you will, I pray that we will all do the same in sharing it. Galen?
Yeah, you know, I want to bring in a question from the one and only Donnelly Ferguson. He's here in the studio audience every single Saturday, and he wants to know, in this current era of polarized voices, how does one learn to hear the difference between the infinite and the spirit of fear to act in a meaningful way? So how do you learn to distinguish between the two, especially in today's society where you know, everyone's peddling fear, and they're peddling fear as if it were wisdom?
That is a great question, Donald. I'm going to answer that, and then Gail, I'm going to go back to something that Ann mentioned with regards to creativity and the mind. The scriptures say, "My sheep shall know my voice and will not follow another." That's a drop mic moment. When my father calls me, Galen, I don't have to ask, "Who is this?" Y'all better come get me. If you spend enough time with the source of infinite wisdom and knowledge, you don't have to ask, "Who is this?" Is this you? That's where you need to be intentional about your meditation time, about time spending in self-reflection, about your writing your memoirs or your notes, your ledger, your log, and things like that, and chronicling all the things that you hear coming from the source. The source, there's only one, and it's unmistakable. It's, again, like that mother hearing the voice amongst all the children on the playground. She knows her child's voice. Of all the voices in the world, worldly and otherwise, there's only one that is the source of infinite wisdom. And if you spend enough time with him, if you spend enough time with God, I'm not going to assign a gender to him. You know, Holy Spirit said, you know, because he doesn't have any genitalia, right? So he is God all by himself, and say he in a generic sense, right? If you spend enough time with God, you'll know his voice, right? And to go to Donnelly, I hope that answers, addresses the question. Creativity, and, you know, in this world, you know, one of the affirmations I say to myself is, the solution to problems come easily to me. In a world where we get paid based upon the complexity and value of the problems we solve, that's a great affirmation. Galen, don't you know that the bigger problem you solve, the more you get paid? The more efficiently and quickly you get it done, the more people are willing to pay you to solve their leadership problems, right? And the reason brain surgeons get paid so much is because they solve a problem that very few people can solve, right? And so I don't care what your vocation, what your occupation is, even if you're just a stay-at-home parent, right? You have problems that need to be solved because you're trying to raise extraordinary children. To be able to profess and proclaim that the solution to problems come easily to you will help you get the job done. The reason I can say that with assurance is Henry Ford, the story was told in the book, right? They're trying to make him look like he didn't know very much on trial. And Henry Ford said, wait a minute, I got a series of buttons on my desk. And if there's something comes up during my day that I need to know, that I don't know in my head, I push a button. On the other side of that is someone who's an expert in that field. I don't need to know everything. I just need to have access to someone who does. Oh, y'all see me coming. I don't know everything in this world, but that's okay. On the other end of the line, it got Jesus on the main line. Tell it. Come on. All right. On the other end of the line is a source of infinite wisdom. And he told me personally, and you too, if any of you lacks wisdom, all you have to do is what, Ann? Ask. And he'll give it to you unabraded and in abundance. And that's why I can confidently say the solution to problems comes easily to me, even if prior to the problem, the solution did not exist. Okay. You know the movie Matrix, The Matrix, and there's a scene where Trinity's on the top of the building and there's a helicopter there. And Neil asks, can you fly the helicopter? And she says, not yet. And she gets on the line and says, download the program to fly the helicopter. And out of the Zion, the headquarters, downloaded the program, and she jumped in the helicopter and flew out. Don't you know the source of infinite wisdom can download to you whatever you need to solve the problems you have in this world? Oh, y'all call me crazy if you want to, but I know it in my Noah. I said, Galen, I know it in my Shanana, right? I know that is a fact, and I hope you understand what I'm saying. All right, I just feel like putting an amen in there somewhere, but amen. Okay, I'm gonna turn it. I'm sorry,
okay.
I was just putting
this is not the place for apologies for that. This is the place for that. Go ahead, Galen.
I was just saying, I just put on YouTube. I hope you've paid up on your mic insurance premium, because we got some collateral damage over here with all these mics you breaking. One of the things
Galen, I have a question though, Galen. Donnelly, did that answer the question?
Because Donnelly started all this.
Yeah, I thank you, Ann. And just gotta go put my kickstand. What Ann just demonstrated was the proper way to address the question. You clarify the question to understand it, then you answer it, but you're not done addressing it until you have confirmed that the question was answered by the person posing the question. So, Ann, thank you for closing the door on that and teaching by example, as you always do. Thank you.
Oh, he's saying yes. He's giving us a thumbs up. Listen, everybody who's listening to this today, no joke. Please subscribe so that you get a notification from us every Saturday morning. We cannot say enough about Wyman, Colette, Doretha, all of you that come on, Diane, Shannon, all of you that come on every Saturday and share with us just with your presence. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat for Wyman, because we are getting ready to land this plane. And Wyman, I think that between you and Donnelly, we could do this every week. There's so much to unpack with this principle, like every single principle. But I really want to challenge every single one of you to do the work, do the inner work that is required to really begin to understand you. Let me say that again. Be willing to do the work. And that work could just be showing up every Saturday. That could be the beginning of the work. Because prayerfully, something that we say, something that we reference, something that we offer will be able to help you answer some of the questions in your spirit that you may have in connecting with this principle, and connecting with the infinite, and connecting with your hunches, and connecting with your own creativity, and really beginning to understand how and what do you do when ideas come. They need plans. What do you do when thoughts and hunches come? They need action. And so I could go on, but I think, Galen, this would be an appropriate time to talk about the annual meeting. And I'd like to challenge our guest to share his thoughts, because if I'm not mistaken, you have attended at least more than one annual meeting. Mr. Wyman, Wymbush, you have any thoughts about our International Mastermind Association Think and Grow Rich annual meeting for your life? This is not a conference for those of you that's listening. It is not a conference. You can go to the International Masterminders with it s.com to register, but we're going to ask Mr. Wyman Wymbush to share his thoughts about that annual meeting and the impact it has had on his family.
Amen. Hey, thank you, Ann, for that. I'm going to draw from another chapter of my life. I was 31 years in commission sales, tech sales and IBM. And when you're in sales, you have weekly cadence calls. When you come in, the cadence call is this: what's your number? In other words, what's your target? What did you do last week? What will you close this week? And if you're behind on your number, you held accountable for coming up with a solution to fix it. The problem is, the challenge for most of us, without accountability partners, without accountability, there's no cadence call for life. I call the annual accountability meeting, it's an accountability call for your life. In other words, you got goals. How'd you do? Where are you? And what are you doing to fix the deficit if you didn't make it? And I love the way Ann describes it. And I'm going to give this total credit to Ann. It's as if there was a tribunal and you were called in once a year, and you have to give accountability for what you did with the 365 days that preceded it, knowing that you would behave differently if you knew, if you didn't properly leverage and take advantage of the 365 prior days that God gifted you, why would he give you another 365? You come in with that sense of accountability. And by the way, without personal accountability, there is no sustained success. Without personal accountability, there's no sustained success. And this is an accountability meeting. That's why it's so important. It anchors your success going forward. Wow. And that's what it means to me.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a quote I love from Osborne. He said, unless you do something different beyond that which you have already mastered, you will never grow. And you just reminded me of that quote, because again, the accountability factor oftentimes is lacking from our New Year's resolutions, all of these things that we say at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, and probably less than 30 days in, we've forgotten exactly what we said. So I'm going to thank you for that. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's another quote I'm going to draw from my other career at 30 years in the Navy, right? In the Navy, you have a lot of inspections, the government. Come on, and you know about government. They have a lot of inspections. But watch this. The saying in the Navy, the quote is, people don't do what you expect. They do what you inspect. When do you allow someone to inspect what you have decreed and declared is your destiny, your purpose, your greatest potential?
All right, Galen, drop the mic.
I had a great question until Wyman did what he just did. So now I'm trying to regather myself. I do have a wondering though, because I continue to hear, and I know we're about to close, but I continue to hear folks say, hey, look, I'm focused on things that are more important than growing rich. Growing rich feels like it's just about money. And I'm focused on the more important things of life. I'm curious, Wyman, as to how you would address those questions. I'm sure you get those as well, because here you are, someone that has a very firm handle on the more important things of life, and you seem to be using this book, Think and Grow Rich, as a strategy, as a means of achieving those things. How would you address those folks that still don't understand the connection between the
Oh my
spiritual
gosh,
and the physical?
Galen, great question. You know what, I was giving you an analogy about the download for the helicopter, creativity. I didn't mention money. I talked about solving problems. And I'm going to take you to a story. You got to look it up on your own. I know the scripture and verse. But Solomon was said to have been the wisest man that ever lived. By the way, it's interesting. He was also one of the wealthiest men that ever lived. Wisdom and wealth go together. But we're not talking about money here, right? There's a story that was told where there was a time of famine and people had turned to cannibalism. And these two women had agreed, they had babies, right? And this is in the Bible, y'all. Y'all stop sanitizing the Bible. It's all kind of stories in the Bible. This is in the Bible, where they had cannibalized one of the babes, and there's time to eat the second one. And the mother of the child did not want it because she loved the baby. So they came to Solomon, and she said, hey, this is my baby. This is my baby. And Solomon says, I got a problem that I need a solution to. He got a download that said, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll saw the baby in half, and each of you will get half of the child that both of you claim to be your own. The download was this: Solomon knew that the real mother would not stand to see her baby sawed in half. And she said, I'll give the baby to the other. And Solomon knew at that point who the real mother was. Problem solved. Nothing to do with money. What page in the playbook are you going to look up that to come up with how to solve the problem about who's lying? It's not in there. The only place you can get that is a download from the third heaven. So I'm telling you, operating in the sixth sense, this whole book, Think and Grow Rich, leveraging your sixth sense, is not all about mammon or money or material thing. Sometimes it's on how to be an aid and a help to our kindred, our brothers and sisters in this earth. Kayla, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it bruises some more mics too. So yeah.
So we're gonna go to Doretha Dennis' question. She says in the chat on YouTube, she says, is there a process for gaining the sixth sense, or does it come naturally? So Wyman or Galen, if you want to tee that up.
Galen, you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, I'm going to turn this back to you, but I like to go back to what the text Think and Grow Rich suggests. That the way that you improve upon the sixth sense is by first mastering all the other principles. The other principles being, what's your desire? Do you have faith? Are you leveraging auto-suggestion to build your faith? Are you surrounding yourself with a group of like-minded people who can speak into what you're trying to accomplish? So once you understand and master the mechanics of what you're trying to accomplish with living this life, then you get access to this extra special something that you can't explain where it comes from, that will show up in the form of the sixth sense.
Yeah, and I would add, Doretha, you can't manage or address something you're not aware of or fail to acknowledge. The first step towards developing the sixth sense is acknowledging that it exists. And then once you acknowledge that it exists, then you start to seek it, right? So once you hear the voice, you start to seek the voice. Once the light comes on, you don't seek to go back into the dark. So once you understand that the sixth sense is there, then you read about it, right? Or you study it, or you find someone who's functioning in it in a master way. That's why you have master classes, right? There's a quote on page 233 in the book, 233, next to the last paragraph at the bottom, it says, this is your mission in life. If you neglect it for any cause whatsoever, you will be reduced to a primal state, and watch this, be compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed through thousands of years. What that means is, if we don't leverage the wisdom of others, those are the elders of the village, those who have written books and bios, study even Solomon. I just mentioned the story about Solomon. If we don't study that and glean from that, we'll have to reinvent the wheel every time we come up to a problem. Every time we come to a body of water, we got to figure out, what do we do? And somebody says, oh, let's build a boat. You study fishermen forever. When you come to a body of water, you already know that, not because you're so smart, but because you studied others. So when it comes to the sixth sense, yes, study, read, model, right? And I'm going to take a page out of one of your council members, one of your board of directors, Galen, Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant said that his game, it doesn't matter what the game is, his happened to be basketball, changed when he stopped becoming an observer of the game and started to become a student of the game. Somebody need to shout. When you become a student of success, your game changes. You can observe successful people, Bill Gates, Bezos, all those guys observe, oh, must be nice, the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and ooh, look at them. That's an observer. But when you become a student of the game, then you position yourself to master the game.
All right. Galen. Wyman, I want to just add, and then we're going to go to wrap up. But Doretha, I jotted some things in the chat on YouTube in addition to everything we've heard. One area to consider in developing your subconscious, no, we talk about subconscious, now it's subconscious, connecting to the sixth sense through your creative imagination. In the creative imagination, it already shares with us, and this is what I put in the chat in response, is you can focus on your meditation. Wyman has shared that. You can focus on journaling. Wyman has shared that. One of the things we've not talked much about are our dreams, because the infinite does speak to us through our dreams. And in addition to that, being mindful in terms of mindfulness. And so those are just some of the ways and actions we can all take to tap into or connect with, if you will, the infinite intelligence. I wrote a book called A Daily Date with Myself. And for me, that's one of the areas that started coming up as I continue to read this book. Like so many of us, find the process that works for you. And this is for all of us. Whatever works for you, Wyman and Galen and myself, we're just here to just share what works for us. This is your relationship with the infinite. This is your relationship with your sixth sense. But you must make time, like we schedule everything else in life. Schedule time in your day, preferably in the morning. One of my favorite books is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, where she talks about her journaling and different things that she does. But so many people have processes and systems that they can use. But find what works for you. But we're going to go back to our special co-host, Mr. Galen Bingham. Any aha moments, Galen, from the podcast today you'd like to share? And then if you share with everybody how they can connect with you, and then we'll go to Wyman, and then we'll wrap up.
Absolutely. I want to go back very briefly to Doretha's question and just say that the sixth sense is like every other muscle that you might have. The way that you build up your arm muscles is to use your arm muscles against some pressure in situations where it really, really matters. The way you build up your thigh muscles is to use your thigh muscles with exercises so that it's strong when it really, really matters. So I'm going to suggest that the way that you build up your sixth sense muscle is to use your sixth sense muscle in small situations so that you got confidence in it. so that when it really, really matters, you know that it's reliable and you can go to it. So I'm going to encourage you to look for opportunities to use your sixth sense, irregardless or in concert with what your other senses may be telling you to do. My name is Galen Bingham. I am the leadership strategist. You can find me all over social media. You can go to my website, galenbingham.com or killglobalcoaching.com. KILN globalcoaching.com. But the best way, the easiest way to get a hold of me, and actually the most fun way to get a hold of me, is to go to my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. We're on every podcast platform. We talk about the whiskeys people drink, the music they listen to, and what they believe it really takes to be an effective leader. I've had the privilege of having both Wyman and Ann McNeil as guests, so we can continue that conversation there. This has been an incredible conversation, Wyman. I always love opportunities to sit at your feet and trade wisdom with you. And back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for that. And Wyman, if you can share with us if you have any products or services or programs or events that you're hosting, we would love to have people know how they can connect with you, and then let people know, any takeaways from yourself for today.
Okay, yes. Yeah, my name is Wyman Wymbush. I am the wisdom broker. I broker wisdom that comes from the source of infinite wisdom to help others develop a high performance mindset. I might also say a kingdom performance mindset so they can reap the spoils of operating at that level. I can be reached at Wyman at wymanwymbush.com. That's my email. It's www.wymanwymbush.com. That's my website. You can find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Wyman Wymbush and all those places. And here's my takeaway. And it goes back to one of the early chapters in the book when Napoleon Hill is talking about that X factor we call charisma, right? In other words, as a leader, someone's got to have the it factor. When I was speaking about my ability to be creative and my source of creativity is not of this world, but is from the source of infinite wisdom, I was speaking with extreme confidence. You could see the energy level go up. Everyone did, I'm sure. But my confidence was not in myself. My confidence was in the God that I serve, because he's faithful. And what he says, he'll do. If he says he'll give you wisdom, he'll give you wisdom. And here's the deal. Because of my confidence in God, I have a certain swagger that's unmistakable. It's a Holy Ghost swagger. And when people see it, it may intimidate them. And some people will hate you just because you got it like that. And I'm just saying, Napoleon Hill, kind of referenced that a little bit. But when your confidence is in God, you have the right to stand tall. You have the right to hold your shoulders back. You have the right to speak with an authority, watch this, that is not of this world. And I'm telling you, when you do that, people take note and people will line up, because they'll not necessarily honor you, but the God in you. That's my nugget.
Let's drop the mic. And I want to just add to what you said. It's not just seeing you, but feeling you. Because oftentimes people will hear this podcast, they will not see it, and they will feel the difference in the shift in your energy. Mm-hmm. And so as we all prepare to wrap up this podcast, always remember that everything is energy. Whether we realize it or not, that includes the infinite intelligence. And going back to Doretha's question and all of the answers that are excellent, it's your energy. How do you tap into your own energy? And thank you so very much, Donnelly, because it is with no fear. It is with the level of confidence that Wyman has espoused and shared, but it is a personal relationship that we must all endeavor to strengthen, like that muscle that Galen referred to, in exercising it every single day. And the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. My name, of course, is Ann McNeil, and I am the master wealth builder, helping you to build a stronger and better life and business. You can connect with me by going to my website at annmcneil.com/coaching. And we would love to invite you to our Clarity Mastermind. I changed my name. So if you look at the name says text 55678 and put in the chat and that is another way to connect with me. And I will make sure that we follow up and send you information. We want to thank all of you that came on. Gloria Riley, so many of you. I don't want to get in trouble by starting to call names, but all of you that share with us every single week, we thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Saturday. And if you are interested in being on this podcast, you can text 55678, and in the chat you put Ann, and we can chat to bring you to the podcast with us as one of our special guests. You can come first time, second time, or third. We would love to have you back. And Wyman, we cannot say enough about you and to you today for joining us, but also blessing us as you elevated our wisdom, knowledge, and understanding about the infinite intelligence. And so until next time, we want to remind all of you to remember to continue to think and grow richer.